All right, so last week I was talking about the fact of what we need for us to have a safe conversation. Do we all remember? It was just last week. Yeah? Yes, good, well done. And we're going to need that this week, because this is where we're going to have to be brave in our conversation. Because we're going to be talking about some spaces where our conversations are unsafe. Yeah? And we're going to be talking about those spaces where we have our clashes and disagreements. And so before we do that, let's just recap on some of the things that we said last week about what we're going to be a safe centre and safe in the way that we talk to one another and have conversations. So the first one is that we're not going to make assumptions. We're not going to assume that we understand what people are saying. We're certainly not going to assume that they agree with us. Because a safe conversation, it means making a commitment to understand where you are coming from. Yeah? That's what we're going to do. We're not going to speak for people. Yeah? Because a safe conversation is where I get to speak for myself and you don't speak for me. A safe conversation then is a dialogue, it's an interaction, it's talking and it's listening, it's talking. And it is a space, a good conversation, a dialogue is a space where I get to know you better and you get to know me better. That's a safe conversation, because that's the priority, that we know each other better. So we're not going to have a monologue. We won't, except for tonight. We're not going to have a monologue where one person speaks and others are not equal in the conversation. Do you remember what we said about that? That sometimes the power differential means that you can't speak because it's not safe. Just for a moment, just imagine, right? Everyone in the group all agrees together on an issue. All of you agree. And you don't. You are the one person who does not agree with what the whole group is saying. So we're not going to find out what he's talking about over there. You are the one person. Do you feel safe to say your one view, particularly if it's different? And there's certain people here nodding because their personality types is, yeah, I'm going to say it anyway. There's not many of us who would be safe enough to say, I disagree with the whole group. Yeah? So when we talk about safe conversations, we have to think about that. We talked about the fact of having a safe conversation when someone's your boss and you're the employee. Suddenly there's a difference. So we need to think about safe conversation. So a safe conversation is where I realise that there are powers at play, that there are spaces where people, particularly those on the margins, particularly those who are not part of the main group, particularly those who have views that differ from the main group, it's really difficult for them to come in and say what they think because they don't want everyone to not like them. So it's much better to stay hidden if you disagree with the group. Just not say it. Yeah. But that's not a safe conversation. Do we want to be known? Like, seriously, is that what we want to be known for? If you want to be part of the safe centre, well, you've got to agree with everyone else here. Like, really? Is that going to be what our value is? Or are we going to look at this seriously and think, like we're going to do today, all right, what would it take for someone who disagrees to still be a part of us, to still be able to bring their perspective? What would it take for people who disagree in that space? The other thing in that space of disagreement is the thing of negative labels. Yeah? You can label someone. It's quite It's quite insidious because you can give someone a label, and what it means, a negative label. So, for example, I keep getting called and being told I'm woke. I don't really understand woke, and I would have thought it would be a really good thing to be woke, because woke means that you are informed and you are fighting for social justice, and I thought that was the gospel. So I can't work out why it is I have a negative label by having the word woke, but anyway, best thing, you're woke, but as soon as you do that, well, we don't have to listen to her because she's woke. That's not a safe conversation. But it's a really good way, isn't it, to get someone, you don't have to listen to them, just give them a negative label. You don't have to listen to them. That's a power imbalance, and that's not a safe conversation. So if you're in the margins of the group, you need the people who are the main group to make way for you. Because a safe conversation is one where you have the right to dialogue. You have your right to your own opinions, even if they differ. Are we all agreeing? Right. So relationships are safe conversations are based on relationships, not subjects. I am not an it that you talk about. I am a person that you speak to. Yeah? And so we don't have discussions about topics. We talk to people and find out what their experience and what their view is. There's this word that's used quite a lot, monologues. Yeah? We're in a monologue, which means that one person's speaking, no one else is really talking. But the problem with the word monologue is that you could have a group discussion where everyone is talking and listening and adding to the conversation. Everyone's getting to know one another really well. And the dialogue experts would still call it a monologue, because all the people who are talking together agree on the subject. There isn't a different perspective in those groups. It is a monologue of one perspective on an issue. Yeah. So even you can have talking and listening, and you can come out and think, "Wow, that was a great conversation." Yeah, bet it was. Everyone agreed. So of course it was going to be a great conversation. So what do you do, right, when you have conversations that clash? There's a guy, his name is Hans-Georg Gardiner, and he said that you can get this colliding of horizons, and it's that we're going to be looking at today. And I think everyone understands that you can see things from different perspectives. But if you have a look on your sheets, there's some pictures, yeah? And there's this idea of, sorry to the people on, should hold up one of the sheets so you can see it. But there's this pictures of, like, if you look at one perspective, you can see, if you look from one horizon, one viewpoint, from the place where you're standing, you can see one thing, but if you come to a different perspective, you can see a different point of view. And the assumptions that we make from our horizons, from the place we stand, I can see, so on your sheet you can see, I can see a rectangle. No, I can see a circle, yeah? I can see a lion eating her baby. No, I can see a lion carrying her baby. Yeah? There's those differences. And there's a guy, he said, we all live under the same sky, but we don't all have the same horizons. And his name was Comrade Adenauer. Do you know him? Oh, no. I just thought maybe you did, because he was the first ever German Chancellor after the Second World War. Talk about difference in perspective. So imagine he steps into his job in 1949, and as far as those in the UK were concerned, Germany in 1949 could wallow in its mire and misery, yeah? No one from a very few from a UK perspective, was thinking, let's look. But for Konrad Adenauer, he was looking from a different perspective of how do I rebuild this nation? How do I rebuild Germany? If ever anyone had the right to speak about it, don't you think he did? These two perspectives that came and they clashed in that space. We all live under the same sky, but we see things from such different perspectives. Gardiner says, if you're standing here and that's your perspective and this is how you see it, right? And someone's standing here and they come along, there's going to be a clash and a colliding. And he says, but what if you stand from the other person's perspective and have a look and see where they're coming from? You've got then you can get what he calls the merging of the horizons, this thing that is like coming together where you can overcome your differences and agree in that space. Can anyone see a problem with that? Doesn't that sound great? Don't you think that sounds great and easy? I love, awesome, isn't it? Anyone see a problem with it?
You have to move. And you're the one who has to move.
Someone's got to move.
You've got to change.
Exactly, change.
You need the other person to see your point of view.
What if you look from the other person's perspective and you don't agree from where they're standing? Excuse me. What if you look and you don't agree with where they are coming from?
Then they're wrong.
Isn't it just the case? Go you, John. Isn't that just the case? You're wrong. And so what you end up with, you can stand where and see where they're coming from and go, okay, I get it, but I don't agree with you. And in that space, boom, you've still got those two clashes. You've got two different perspectives. Here's a really funny, I think it's a funny story about Gardiner. He probably did not find this situation funny, okay, but I thought it was funny, right? Because he's an expert in dialogue and he is an expert in how to, when that clash and collide comes, and what you should do and how you can get a merging of horizons. He was having a debate with another dialogue expert called Jürgen Habermas. And they came together, and Habermas is also an expert in what you do when horizons and perspectives and the way you see things clash, okay? And they got together and they clashed. And by the end of the debate, they were further apart than when they came together, right? And one of the reasons for that, we'll talk about it in a minute. One of the reasons that they clashed is they made assumptions on stuff they agreed with. Do you remember last week that I said you might have got to the end of the session and thought, well, that was all obvious. You'd think it would be obvious to these two experts. They are experts, actually. I'm not, they are experts. But they came together and they had these assumptions. If they could have worked out some of their assumptions before they started their debate, it would have been a bit easier anyway. So it's not like blooming obvious. You have to really work at it and think about some of this stuff. But the other thing is, even if they had worked out their assumptions, that just would have been like one layer of the onion that they were peeling. In the research that I did, that was all about these spaces where people collide over their perspectives, people said it was like that. Just because you might be able to deal with one issue, it's just peeling one layer off an onion, and then you've got another thing that you don't agree on, still on the same subject, yeah? And another thing, and it's just like all you do is cry the whole time, yeah? Right? This is what it is like. So, there's another guy, his name is Richard Bernstein. He's a American professor of philosophy. He's from, he did most of his work from Harvard. And he said that sometimes when we have these like clashes in how we view things, what happens is we can get possibly a bit defensive and a bit more extreme in our views because we're trying to make our point, trying to make people understand, and our emphasis in that space where on my point of view and what I think, we get a bit stronger in. And if you just stop and take a breath and just come back, you realise that maybe you don't think quite as strongly as you were putting across when you were trying to make your point, that maybe there are some things in what the other person's saying that you can agree on, and you can find some spaces where you can start to work together. But we don't, because as soon as someone crosses what you believe and what you think, your first response is to emphasise, increase the emphasis so they understand your point of view. Don't we? Yeah, we do. I know you're sitting there thinking, oh no, I wouldn't do that. Yeah, you would. I said to Daniel about the fact of when you think about that colliding of horizons, it's not really all that surprising, is it, that we would rather avoid having these conversations and have to peel layers of onions and just find ourselves crying over so many different things, or having to do that thing where you just feel like I'm clashing or don't agree with it, and we'd rather avoid it. Yeah? And Daniel said to me, oh, well, except for the ones on the internet who like to just fight. So for some of us, I have to agree, some of us quite like it in the clashing of the horizons. But for most of us, we would rather avoid it, wouldn't we? Yeah? And then I said to him, but Daniel, still most people would want to avoid it. And again, he's like, well, yeah, no. Not if you have a kingdom mindset and you want to be in John 17 and you want to love one another and place relationship first. You're not going to avoid your arguments then, because what you're trying to do is find those spaces where you can work together and show how it is you can love one another in a space where you disagree. Because that's a kingdom mindset. So we're going to have a little bit of a talk about that. But I just wanted to say that at the beginning of the talk, because I want you to start thinking, okay, what is a kingdom mind? The kingdom of God? Righteousness, peace, joy, love, the kingdom of God. What is that kind of generosity? What does that look like in a conversation where you fundamentally disagree with one another? Okay, so in your groups, I would like you to take a few minutes, right? Because right now in our world, has anyone noticed that we have a lot of spaces where people are colliding in their standpoints, in their horizons, in how they view things? There's a lot of clashes going on in our world right now. Right? And there's also a lot of places where the culture is changing and there's a lot of change happening. And that, again, is something you have to get your mind around, because you think, oh, the culture and the world is changing and it's going against some of the things that I've known and done. So we're looking at the idea of culture change, the idea of clashes, and spaces where the whole world is arguing. Yeah? All right, see what you can come up with. What do we reckon? Have we got some ideas where the cultures are changing and the worlds are clashing and... Everyone's still talking. All right, I'm going to start a list. All right, who wants to go first? Do you want to just shout? Oh, go on then, Brum.
What's the question?
Where are spaces for your clash? What I should have said was, what are they talking about on Facebook? Because doesn't that have space where everyone clashes? Yeah? Okay, so what are some spaces where there are clashes in perspectives?
Well, we've talked about the wars, there's other way to them.
Yeah?
You just group them into like other way to them.
Yeah. On your sheets, I've put a little picture. I don't know what page we're on now, but there's a little picture of page 2 from the BBC that shows the rise in nationalism now, right? And so you can look at areas like, and judge areas like Iran or the Taliban maybe, those places, and think that's fundamentalism, that's wrong, that's but there's this massive increase in nationalism, right, that's making us and them, in and out, for and against. That's a clash, isn't it? What do we think? No? Can you see that would be a clash? So into this space, what we're seeing is the us and them. So whether that's fundamentalism or right-wing nationalism, however you want to see it. What other things? Holly?
I said women's rights / pay gap.
Yeah.
Men's rights.
Yeah. What about the Me Too movement? That was huge, wasn't it? Didn't that stir up a whole load of... what do you mean? Didn't that? Sorry, you're right. Do you remember the whole, when the Me Too movement first started, how it was reported all the time? It's still here, it's still going. But that initial clash, even though it's still clashing, you are right. But women's rights, the whole thing actually about gender, isn't that a huge question? Yeah. What about transgenderism? And the fact of how you identify, what's the rights and wrongs of that in that space. That's a huge discussion point. What else?
Racism.
Yeah.
Or race conversation.
Which also includes things like Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. One of the things that Stephen and I were talking about in this space of like whether it's race or gender or disability or whatever, is when you try and stand up and say, like say in the space of the book we're reading, My Body is Not a Prayer Request, when you stand up and you say, I don't like that language, don't use it, you have to justify. But it's like, I'm the one who's a woman, I'm the one who's disabled, I am the one, surely I should have some rights on how you talk about this. And yet, or I'm the one who's black or race or whatever, and yet you don't have the right to speak on it because the majority say, no, hang on, you're just sensitive, you're just misunderstanding me.
I think even the fact that these things get labels, so the Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter, it's a bit like, around the abortion thing where it's pro-choice or pro-life, but it means now you've only got two options, and the fact that you are on one side, end of discussion, that's what you believe. There's those, black and white.
Mm-hmm. Black and white. So, about Trump. Even that...
So you mean black, white and orange?
Do you all hear that? Black, white and orange. But the thing about it, isn't it interesting how it's become a thing of if you are for Trump, you are a Christian, or if you're for Trump, you're not a Christian. It's like, isn't it? This devices, this clashing. What about climate change? What about transhumanism? You know, the Do you know this one? The debate about where you're, the fact that we're going to be 3D printing all of our organs and all the bits that are breaking. So you're not ever going to die because we'll just get, bits like reprinted. We're not quite there, but we're getting there. Yeah, everyone's going to. Yeah.
Are we having a monologue?
Yes.
What's that?
All of these spaces. And in this space, what about sexuality? Yeah? The plebiscite, the rights for gay and lesbian marriage. What about that? Yeah? All right. And in that space, everything's like turning and changing. And particularly, I think, for people who are Christians in church, we have this sense of like, oh my gosh, it's all changing. And the church is more on the margins. Less people go to church than they used to. The largest, fastest growing church in the Baptist movement here in South Australia are the Myanmar churches. Yeah? That's a completely different look for Christian church with the power. It's the Myanmar churches. So churches are on the margins. Not saying that's a bad thing. I actually think it's a good thing. Less people go to church. People who do go to church go less often, which means there's less money. There's a whole load of changes here, isn't there, that cause us in this clashing of our different perspectives. So in that space, and particularly for, I think everyone here belongs to the church, in that space where you can sort of feel that things are changing and everything, what feeling does it leave you with? Have a little chat in your groups. What does it feel like to have all these clashing perspectives, all this changing world around you? What does it feel like in that space of the clash? Got it? All right. Do you guys want to go first? When everything is changing, how do you feel?
Very unsettled.
Unsettled? What else? Confused?
I feel uncertain, but that makes me want to lean towards certainty and pick a side.
Yeah.
I said it depends on what side you're on as to whether or not you might feel downtrodden or empowered.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
There's a deep desire to want to be obedient to what God's saying in the space, but not knowing quite how to do that.
That's very good. It's quite positive.
We thought that was a moment of insight. No, 30 years of experience.
And that's as far as you've got, though.
That's as far as I
What about fear? Fear? Fear of saying anything? What about the opposite, the fear of slippery slope? Fear is a huge one, isn't it? Don't you think? It's sort of like, okay. Again, from doing all this research with people in this space, number one response was silence, and the reason for that, I didn't want to talk about, don't ask, don't tell, let's not talk about this stuff. Why? Because of fear. I'm going to lose relationship. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I don't even know how you even talk about this stuff. I'm fearful that if I start to talk in this space, people might think I agree with them, and and I'm going to be labelled a heretic, or I'm going to lose my job. So, it's a conversation, and we can't even have it because of the amount of fear.
the desire not to hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. I think moral outrage is part of it. We can have a.
Hurt, not help. Desire. Ron has a desire not to help. That sums up Ron.
Well, actually, I should put it the other way, the desire to love in the space.
So, I was going to say I might be as well. I think that thing of our Basically, I think you can sum all of that up. It's really uncomfortable, isn't it? Isn't it uncomfortable? Why is that? Why is it difficult to talk in this space of colliding horizons? And it's because the things that we are talking about, some of the things you don't care about, like, then you're neither here nor there. But a whole load of the stuff that we get so passionate about, so defensive, so emphasising our point, is because there are sacred values. Yeah? These are things that are part of your core identity. They make you who you are, either side of the perspective. Yeah? So it's not that from where you are standing, you've got the absolute authority or the only understanding of this is part of my core identity. A person who is looking that way also has that same feeling, this is my identity. Yeah? It's my values. These are my spiritual beliefs. These are non-negotiables in my life. The thing about the sacred values in that space is these are not things that I'm going to compromise over or I'm going to negotiate, do a bit of trade with them. It'd be like trading your kids, wouldn't it? All right, to agree, I'll just get rid of it. Don't do it. I'll just get rid of this one kid. These are really strong values, right? Yes? These are sacred values. And so you can see why we have this space where we collide and we crash. But that's only one side. What about the other side of truth? When you can know the truth. Isn't that part of the reason why we collide? Because our perspective is the truth. Yeah. What happens in that space?
As Nicholson said, some people can't handle the truth.
Some people can't handle the truth. Well, actually, there's a whole, that's quite deep, but we're not going to go there. Truth, your way of thinking about things, and particularly when it's your faith and everything, the way that you understand how the Bible is written, what is in there, what it means, how you should live, all of those things, this is truth in your space. Yeah? And again, when you come into this thing of how do you, well, it's truth, I'm not going to negotiate. Is it really truth? Certainly not, there's a lot more now that people will say, but it's my truth. Heard that one? Yeah? And we sort of go, oh no, there's only the way, the truth and life, as if there's one. But just like for a moment, think about this in your groups again. Write down all the places of truth where the church disagrees. Yeah? Can you do that? Just a few. Just write down some ideas of spaces where we disagree over truth. How are we doing? You got... So hang on a minute, guys. So Bron was just saying she doesn't think there's much that the church does agree on, which, you know, yeah.
But I also have this sense of, if it's around some parts of that, is that just different expression is okay because different people are different to each other?
Yep.
People are different to each other. So
But-
to have this expression, is that something that for me is the way I would express like Pentecostal or very traditional or whatever. But then I think that's different to, like, there's so many things that this church does it that way and this church does it that way.
There's a lot of different ways that the churches express themselves. So even our denominations, like the idea of Pentecostalism versus, say, a very traditional church, maybe like the Brethren. It's quite, right? But if you look at this idea of the Bible says, there's quite a lot of spaces where we're not quite sure what it says, okay? So, women in ministry. Come on, what else? What don't we agree on?
Speaking in tongues and the gifts of the Holy Spirit.
I think in Genesis 1.
Exactly, did you hear that? Starting in Genesis 1, all the way through the Bible, this is what we don't agree on, okay?
We can spend a while in Genesis 1.
Exactly. So we don't agree on sexuality, we don't agree on gender, we don't agree on creation itself, 7 days, or, what. Atonement, it's like, there is a lot of different truths out there, isn't there? Yeah, there's divorce, there's a lot of truth out there. And so, second marriages, oh my gosh, we have a lot of places. And sometimes I was thinking about this earlier, sometimes you think, well, the majority of the church believes this, so that's why we should stick with the majority of what the church says. Yeah, except the biggest church, Christian church, is Roman Catholic. Okay, so if we are going to stick with that idea, then we need to look at ourselves as Protestants because the largest church. Can you see what we do with our arguments? Can you see how it's all so subjective? There is maybe a space for having a little more grace in the area of this is my truth. When we're coming into spaces where we don't agree. Yeah? Having a little more grace to think you see things differently from your journey with God. It's different from mine.
Can I accept the principle of wonder? I mean, some people's truth is atrocious. I mean, if we take racism as an example, the decision that certain people are less available for human rights because of their colour, that can be good truth, but I'm not really comfortable leaving it there. Because I think it impacts on other people who need to be protected from your truth.
But then couldn't you use that argument for pretty much anything else that we're talking about?
Exactly. So the decision that my truth is somehow protected because it's my truth, I think runs up against the practical thing of, well, your truth is just making other people's lives miserable, so give it up.
Yes, but the point is, let's say that you've got a different idea on gender, for being one of them, and so somebody's truth is, well, I've never felt male at birth, and this is the way that I am. But leading that along, then people are told that they can be mutilated or whatever as a young person, and so people are getting hurt by those choices. And so you could argue that it's your right to defend that in the same way that you were talking about racism. You could say that I'm defending this because people are getting hurt, and then what I presume you're saying is, well, I won't even enter the conversation on some of these things because they're so absurd, they're not my truth, or that I need to protect people. But as soon as you do that, you've then got a problem with pretty much everything, because you could argue people are getting hurt or people are...
Yeah, but...
Can we all hear okay? Yeah?
I mean, I guess part of my concern would be that sometimes my truth is actually not my truth. I'm not actually, I'm not trans, but I've got an opinion on how trans people should live. I'm not gay, but I have opinions on whether or not they get married. So I never felt particularly threatened by same-sex marriage because I was already married to Colleen and that was kind of stuck. So why would it bother me? So even if I thought people needed to be protected from themselves, it was still kind of their choice to do that. But I do get worried about the rise of fascism in Europe.
Yes, it is really scary. You can see how complicated it is, right? We are not going to be able to solve these things. However, what's particularly on this issue of truth, right? What we're going to look at is how we host the conversation. But let's just come back to this discussion of going on. One of the things about this idea of truth is that if you're going to have a dialogue, okay, you're going to talk I to a person and not an it. And if a conversation becomes something where people have got a lot of opinions on an it that is not them, that should be a red flag to us. That thing, so whatever the point of view is, that becomes a thing of like, oh, you're really strong on that truth, but you are not that person. I'd really like to talk to someone who is, who it is their experience in that space. I'm not saying that we are going to be able to agree on truth or work it all out. See, this is the problem, we can't. Right? We'll find this out onto what we're going on to, because we're going into the wonderful world of liminality, the space of betwixt and between, where we're able to sit in a space where we don't agree, but above everything else, we have really valued relationship with each other, above everything else, above truth. When we talk about this thing, how we can have conversations over things that are true, I think that one of the things we're going to be talking about is the fact you can meet with someone who's got a totally different perspective from your own and engage with that perspective. You can go through this thing that we're going to talk about. So you've got two responses. You can go that way, or you can go that way. So one's a good way, one's not the way to go. You've got a way you can respond in that space. But just because you've engaged with someone whose perspective is different from yours doesn't mean they're going to change your mind. Doesn't mean you're going to see exactly from their perspective and agree with them. Yeah? So I've got friends whose religion is different from mine. They're still my friends. Yeah? We see things differently. I've got people in my family that I see life very differently from, but they're still in my family. No, aren't they, dear? So,
Yes, Daniel, you're still married.
well, come on, you have those people who are married, yeah? You don't agree with everything with your partner, do you? Oh, well, I must have a terrible...
I myself agree with Colleen.
I was going to say, some of us have different marriages. We're not, this is what we're trying to say, is this thing of, in this space, how about, instead of having this thing about absolute truths and everything, maybe there is space for coming away from the I-it conversations and having to look at the I and now conversations.
I mean, you're talking about agreeing. If you change the word to love, I think it changes. You don't have to agree with everyone, but you do have to love everyone.
Yeah.
And even the people that you disagree with most aren't excluded from the requirement to love them. And if you love them, you care about why they think what they think. Mm-hmm. And you care about what they think affects their life and whatever. But you still longer, and that keeps it as an ideal conversation.
I think that's really wise. I think that if we stop looking to like defend the truth and work in that space, what if, like Daniel, I said right at the beginning, Daniel said, what if our priority is that we are going to be a people who love one another, even in spaces where we disagree. And that when people look at us in our place of disagreement, all they can see is that we love each other. What difference would that make? I'll tell you a couple of stories in a minute. But this is called Theory U, and it's by a guy called, so helpful to me, Schama, Otto Schama. Actually, he got it from someone else, he expanded it. But you can find it on your page, I don't know if it's page 3. So what happens is, in this space of colliding horizons, where you have a clash in perspectives, that becomes a catalyst. And in that space, a catalyst is something that causes change, right? Or has the potential to cause change. And in that space, so something happens and it challenges your way of thinking, challenges your viewpoint. It's a horizon that you haven't seen before, different way of looking at something. And in that space, you have 2 choices. Okay? So here's our change agent. One way that you can respond, which I want to say is not a good way, particularly if we're wanting to have safe conversations and we're wanting to be a safe centre that allows people in the margins to have some power in the conversation, be able to talk about their experiences, what they believe, what they think. One of the things you can do is immediately to go up this, it's called absencing. You distance yourself. You take yourself out of the conversation. You take yourself away from that thing that is making you feel so uncomfortable. And you just come away from it. And what you do is you start climbing up this side of the you. And the first thing is that you do is you challenge the view of what's just been said to you. Right? Just like, so the idea in that is often fake news. Well, that's not true. That can't be the case. But the other thing is we can dismiss it, like I said, with this idea quite easily to dismiss in this space, not just by calling it fake news. You can label it. Oh, well, that's, don't have to listen to that. That's this thing. We dismiss it. Won't engage in it. We dismiss what the person is saying because it doesn't, come into our way of viewing things. And then the second stage after this, like dismissing this idea of your fake news and everything, you come into this stage, which is your echo chamber. And what you can do, and we all do this, like I do this, you do this thing like right, and then you come in, and what you do is you go back to people who agree with you to have that conversation about this thing that's challenged you. You go to people you know who are going to agree with you. Yeah. So Daniel says something I don't like. I will go to someone that I know disagrees with Daniel, so they'll agree with me. So if you do it on a basic level, don't do that. You're going to do it on the big stuff. You'll go back to the books that you've read or the people that you know who are speaking the same language. So then what you can do is say, I don't have to think about this because they're all saying the same thing that I am. It's an echo chamber of your own voice, your own thoughts. And in that space, you come up here and you really you're absent, right? Having done that, you're completely absent from the conversation. You're absent from the colliding of horizons, that you're absent in your thinking. One of the guys said, one of the dialogue theorists, David Bohm, Bohm, not Bowie, shame, eh? But David Bohm, he said in this space, this is where you become bankrupt in your thinking, because you're not thinking anything other than what you already know, and you've absenced yourself from the conversation. But what's interesting, so this is the stages we go through. This is it. This stage here and this one here. This is the outworking, what it looks like, how you relate to people, how you talk in this space here, what it looks like when you make this choice to not engage. And the first thing you do is you blame others. It's one of the things, the research that I did honestly put me into therapy. It was overwhelming the way that people would speak to one another. It was cruel. And I was just so shocked. And so one of them, there's this gay man, and he's a Christian, and he was talking with this guy, and they're having lunch together. And he was just talking about his relationship with God and how he as a gay man saw that and what God was talking about, and just chatting away. And the other guy just lost it. He got so angry. And I'm not going to tell you what he said, it was disgusting. He was just so rude and offensive, and he had a go at this guy. And this gay guy said to me, I was just eating my sandwich. And I was like, oh. And then the guy who was angry turned around to the gay guy and blamed him for the fact that he was angry. Because the guy was like, I'm sorry, I didn't. And it was like, you should have been. No, it didn't say that. I'm not going to tell you what it said. But this whole thing of like, it is your fault that I am angry. It's abusive, isn't it? Yeah. But don't we do that in that space? Like, if only you would have got. There are so many stories of that. The people in their space where they disagree over the thing, could not engage with the conversation, didn't like the discomfort, wasn't coping with a different perspective, and it was all the other person's fault how they responded. Yeah? So in this thing of theory U, this is not a theory, this is real conversations with real people who are getting really hurt. Yeah? Or because you couldn't cope with a perspective that was different from your own. From this one, coming down under the blaming others, and again, saw this with the research, what happens is that it destroys relationship. It destroys trust. Well, would you go and have lunch with that person again? If they're going to explode when you're just talking about your life from your perspective, would you trust them? Right, I wouldn't trust you. There was a guy, I'll read you this one. Just destroying relationship. And it was during the plebiscite, and this man, he was actually a minister. So I'm really sorry. It wasn't me, but I still feel that level of responsibility. He was a minister, and he went up to someone, and he got really aggravated because he was feeling uncomfortable over the plebiscite, over gay marriage. He just was really aggravated. And he just blurted out all this stuff to this woman. He said if gay people would just confess their sins and stop doing what they're doing, then perhaps they could be accepted, but they are great sinners. Perhaps they could be accepted? Okay. Here's the thing. That woman's got a gay kid. What do you think that response had on her to the in that conversation? Like, would you let your kid go to that church? Or be near that person or in that relationship? We should feel uncomfortable, not because of the thing we're having challenge. We need to feel uncomfortable in this space where things are happening, you know? When the guy was, either of them were talking from their perspective, if you're an outsider looking in, would you look and go, wow, they really love each other? Wow. By this, all people will know that you are my disciple, says Jesus. Yeah?
Where does he say that, Jules?
Actually, this one's not in John 17, but it is in John. If you have love one for another. Yeah? If you have love one for another. This is that space of showing, will you tell me? If you were an outsider looking at that lunch or at that conversation, would you have gone, wow, they really love one another? Uh-huh.
Or would you say that you loved him enough to tell him that he was a sinner and needed to change his ways? I mean, because that's the thing. The people who are hostile are doing so they think or they feel, some of them, maybe most of them, are doing it for the other person's eternal good.
See, but we're really back in that space again, aren't we? Of which I said right at the beginning, in that space where your perspectives collide, what is the most important thing? That you make your point? That they hear what your argument is? That they know what you stand for? Is that your priority? Or is it that in that place where your horizons clash, where your views and perspectives clash, is your priority that you get to know them a little bit better and they get to know you a little bit better? Is your priority to have a conversation over it, sin? Or is your priority to have a conversation with the person and hear what they have to say, as well as what you've got to say in that space? I think it's that thing, you know, in this thing of what our conversation is about, how we're doing it. What's our priority in this space? And remember, when we're talking about, I'm asking questions. We haven't decided yet what we're going to be known for. So I'm asking the question, what do we want to be known for? In the place where we have real clashes in our sacred values, we're not going to change what we think or our perspectives because we can't. Yeah? What will we be known for? That we stood up for the truth? I'm sorry, you already know what I think. That's not fair.
I think that it's not about whether it's the truth or not, it's whether the end justifies the means by which we go about it.
Here's the thing. Do you think that either of those people who told me those stories, where the two people got so angry and were really, said things that were really hurtful to them, do you think that either of those two people changed their mind when they were confronted with the truth of that other person's perspective? Or do you think they just thought, this is so unsafe and you are so angry, or you haven't listened to me? Like, what do people go away with?
I think too, it comes back to that bigger understanding of what is most important. Jesus want us to know the truth, or does Jesus want us to have a relationship? Because if the most important thing is the truth, then yeah, you need to defend that with everything. But if the most important thing is relationship, then the truth becomes not the most important thing. So
Can I argue
yeah.
there?
Hang on a minute, can I just say for people who can't hear? So the question is, what's more important then in that space? Is that we defend the truth? Like, does Jesus want us to defend the truth? Or does he want us to work on relationship and keeping that relationship with each other?
And so what I would like to suggest, John, is that Jesus is the truth. Not that it's true about Jesus, but Jesus knows the truth, that Jesus is the truth. And so our relationship with Jesus is truth.
Yeah.
And so it's not truth or relationship, it's relationship is truth. Our relationship with Jesus is truth.
So relationship.
I did this in the process of last year. And one of the things that you said is like, is this going to bring you closer to God or are you moving further away? You could probably follow that conversation.
Yeah, so we're back to relationship and truth. Moving closer to Jesus is going to be more truthful than even agreeing a doctrinal truth about Jesus or a doctrinal truth about how to live. But moving closer to Jesus relationally is always going to be closer to truth.
Yeah. And don't you think that if you've got a solid relationship with someone, because you've worked to develop that solid relationship, I think about this in terms of my work stuff, and I think when I've heard, like for example, there are a lot of issues used up coming in that still hold traditional racist views because of their intergenerational learning, whatever. And one of the things I found is if you develop a relationship with those people, you can begin to then have curious conversations with them. Curious conversations that allow them to hear different ideas in a non-threatening way about what they might have grown up with, or what they might have inherently learned from their parents, or what they might not have even known or had any connection with. So they might never have even met someone from another culture. And so you have this opportunity, I think, to have these gentle, very gentle, curious conversations once you've established that relationship that they know they feel safe with you. To sort of say, well, I don't know if I said the right thing in this topic, or but they're safe enough to say to you, I don't know if I got that right.
I think so if you heard what Bron was saying in that space, that, you know, you can have a curious conversation, but isn't it interesting how we put all the responsibility on someone else to have that we are going to have and cause them to have a curious conversation? What if it's the other way around and we're the ones who's supposed to be having the curious conversation? What if, right? Do you remember I was talking about all these changes and all these things that are happening in our world and this clash of cultures and everything else? What if that's God trying to get our attention and get us to start thinking a bit differently? Right? What if all of these changes of thinking and culture and people who come across the path and think, my gosh, that is so different to how I view the world. What if instead of immediately thinking, right, how am I going to educate you into the right way of thinking? What if we just stop for a moment and think, okay, Lord, what do you want? What are you challenging here? What is it that's this catalyst that's come into my world? Something's made me, what if it's God and he's got something to tell us through that person, something that's different?
So in Bron's example, you come across someone who has racist views, and instead of going in the conversation and going, how can I help them to be less racist, you're instead going, what does this person have to share with me?
What is it? Who is this person? I'm going to get to know you better. What's going on here? What are you telling me about? Before I jump in with my judgments, what are we talking about here? How, like, do do you even know how you're being hurt? What if we just stop for a minute and think, okay, Lord, what is... And like I said, you could have a conversation with someone, right? And like think it all through, and you're not going to change your mind on some stuff, but you don't know what will change in your attitudes, or you just have no idea, do you? But here's one of the interesting things. This is you theory. And the idea is that you have this something that causes you to have a catalyst for change. And so what people who have taken Skarma's work, Christians, have done, have taken this work of you theory and expanded it into Christian worlds. They call this the death and resurrection. This is your baptism, right? This place where you become less like yourself and you change your thinking, okay? And you have that thing, and it causes you to die to yourself until you come round down here and you're dead. And the thing is, you honestly, going through this, you come down this side, what I do is I cling on to the side. I do not die quickly. I put and you can hear my nails scraping as I fall down, as my thoughts are like, oh my gosh, what about? So, and I get challenged, and I see stuff about myself and spaces where I am intolerant, or I don't know, you just get this thing. But it takes an awful long time to die, and you don't know you're dead until you're down here. So according to Tani in our church, she says you know you're dead in your thinking when you have absolutely no idea what you think. And when people say something you do, you don't care either, because you're dead, right? You can't, there's nothing left. And you're down here not knowing what you think, what you feel, what it means. You're dead, and you're at peace about it because you're dead. And then you know you're dead. While you're still having all this, like, what about, how about, and just wrestling, you're probably still going through it. And then you come out this side, which is the resurrection side, where you start thinking, well, Lord, I think this, having gone through this process, but I think this, Lord. And I think, and you realise that in that space between someone with a different perspective and yours, there is emerging a space where you do agree, something that you've realised that you couldn't see before, but now that you can. Yeah? You've still got stuff, because the thing about the merging of perspectives is I'm still seeing from my point of view. It's just that I can see also from your point of view, and something in me has changed because of that. I have changed. And so what, getting back to Skarma, and actually we talk about this as baptism. This is the whole gospel. This is the whole Bible, because there's spaces like exile and wilderness. How many of you know what it's like to be in wilderness in your relationship with God? You know, and you're like, what is going on here? And does God still love me? Why am I not being used? Yeah, that's all your dying process until you're down here and you're just like, I'm dead. And then you come out this side and you realise what you learnt, how your trust in God has changed. So wilderness, exile, baptism, these are all spaces where you go through. You could do it in the natural. A big change could be like going from like teenagers, yeah? When you're no longer a child and you're becoming an adult. These are my parents' values as a child. What are my values going to be as an adult? Yeah? When you get married, I think like this, we now think like this. Yeah? So there's all these spaces where we do this anyway. But in this thing, to go through this process and to come out the other side, you may not agree with them, but to go through the process, the first thing that you do is just suspend judgment. before you jump in with the thing and how they're going to listen to you and all the rest of it, what if you just suspend judgment? Just think, it's a different perspective. It's not mine, but it's different. Not going to judge it, just going to sit with that. See whether or not you start falling off what it challenges and how you're falling off the edge of that. Instead of going back to your echo chamber to find your answers, what if in that space you start engaging with multiple perspectives? Just thinking, wonder who else thinks like this? And if they do think like this, what do they think? And again, you may not agree with them. Honestly, throughout this PhD, I have read a lot of stuff with people that I got to the end of what they'd written and thought, I don't agree with you. I don't. But I learnt something but oh my gosh, the stuff I've been reading, Daniel's like, Julie, can you take some of your books off of our bookcase, please? Because if anyone comes in to our house, they're going to wonder what on earth's going on. Because there's all these perspectives that are so different from, well, let's just say I wouldn't recommend you read anyone. So, totally different, yeah? Didn't agree with them, but I did learn some stuff that, I didn't know you saw things like that. A lot of the stuff made me think, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry we didn't put love first in that space. And what comes down here, this is the Christian side. I can't remember if Shkama says it as well. You let go. God, I know what I think, or I know what I used to think, or I know what I think I'm thinking, or I don't, but Lord, I just don't know. And here's the thing, we get such a thing, don't we, about, got to protect the church. Yeah, Jesus said that he builds the church. He's been doing it for centuries. I think he can cope. Just because you're thinking differently from what you've always been taught, I don't think the church is going to blow up. I do think we could perhaps stop being quite so bankrupt in the way that we think. Maybe we could engage and use our brains, but that's a whole other thing. You let go near the end, and you just let be. I'm useless at that. I haven't worked this one out yet. Enough people who know me are like, Julie, you preach on this, and you still don't get this bit yet. Because I always want to try and work it out too quick. I can't just let things be. But I'm learning to. Well, at least I'm trying to. Letting come. I'm just sitting. This is uncomfortable until you get used to it. I don't know what I think. But let's see what goes. And then new thoughts or old thoughts or new things start to come up. You start to build it up. And in this space, some of those thoughts start to crystallize in your head, and you start thinking, I think this. And from that space, then you start sort of like speaking about it, sort of saying, I'm thinking about such and such, to see what other people, how they will respond, okay? And that's a really hard stage. Too much gets aborted, because you start speaking and people go, well, you should be thinking this. I was like, hang on a minute, I'm still trying to work this out. How about giving me some space to allow me to think this so I can try and work out? And then you come to this thing and you think, well, if I think this and I'm speaking this, how does that outwork in my relationships? Let me test my idea on you. That's what you start doing with one another. Until you come up here and you've got this, you're different. How much different from when you started, who knows? May not be all that different, but you would have learnt something. You will have gone through something where you have worked out a different thing. Even down to this sort of thing where you think, Jesus is the truth. So the truth is found in relationship with him. So the truth is in relationship and love. Yeah. And people walking towards Jesus. Could be the thing you come out. Who knows what you come out with? who knows what we will come out with in Safe Centre if we will have a bit more courage, bravery to go through this process. We're thinking, oh God, I don't know what I'm thinking, I'm losing everything and I'm on the slippery slope and, you know, everyone's labelling me. I don't know what do I care, I'm dead. Okay, but what I really think is, these are what my values are. This is what I'm learning about the Lord. This is what I understand about relationship with one another. So I want to put it out as a challenge that we go that way.
Isn't that a little bit like when you believe you die to yourself?
Yeah, you're supposed
You have
to.
to be born again. Like, it's sort of an echo, I guess, of that process of actually just that's there, you're now here, but it's new and different and you're not sure what it's going to look like.
One of the interesting things, don't you think, that when we become maybe like join church and all your thinking changes and everything, and then somehow there's this sort of understanding you're supposed to know it and you're not supposed to like challenge again, like die again. Cool, you did that when you became Christian or came to church or joined the group, whatever. I've done that, don't have to do it again. No, we're supposed to be a people who are doing this. Maybe.
Is this the same concept as deconstruction, or is it a different nuance?
I think the thing with it can be when you're going through this thing, you like tearing down everything you think so that you can build it up again. But I don't think we totally deconstruct everything, do we? You don't tear everything, throw everything out. In this space, all you're doing is you're not trying to deconstruct so much as okay, Lord, I'm suspending my judgment and I'm going to listen to different people's ideas and see what challenges that brings to me. So it's more about a challenge. I think this is more about growth than I think deconstruction, honestly. But you are right. Some of the spaces where I've had to think, I've had to pull everything and think, why do I think that? Why do I think that? Why do I think that?
I think often we think about whatever the subject is, and it's something that we've either been brought up in or we've kind of like looked at it 30 years ago, we've framed our thinking, and then that's it. And when anybody else challenges it, it's like, no, I know what I believe.
Yeah, the default.
But then, like if you either hear about things an awful lot more, or you've got a member of the family who is going through something, you actually decide to explore it and you reevaluate whatever it is that you're thinking. But until that point, you're actually quite defensive about it. No, this is what I believe, I'm not budging, blah, 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 blah. But when something, as I say, comes in either by sustained dripping of a tap, it's constantly in the conversation, or something happens in your life or somebody you love, you're forced to reevaluate. And I think that's what we're talking about here. It's that thing of looking at it in fresh light and actually, okay, some things, this used to resonate, something isn't resonating, something's, what's going on here? And it's then looking at all the stones that you use to build whatever opinion you've got on something, and allowing all of those things to come down before you start rebuilding again. I mean, that's what liminality is. And a lot of it, though, is, what you've been talking about is often we're not even willing to look at things because, hang on, if I know that, it's like a repair job. I know that if I fix this hole, I'm going to end up taking the whole wall down. And often with some of our opinions, it's the same, or our thoughts, because if we tackle that, we know actually that underpins an awful lot of other things that we believe as well. And we look at it, we begin to tackle it, and actually we can't then cope with all of the mess that we've created just because we unpicked one brick and the whole thing has come down. And that's I think what the issue is with how we process these things.
Absolutely. And so my thing is to say to you, I'm putting out a challenge. What if? instead of going to this, when we come to conversations that are different, we go, hello, you've got a different point of view from me. And accepting that challenge and running with it and not being scared that it might unravel. Yeah, the thing is, you're not bankrupt in your thinking. You're not stupid, yeah? You're quite capable of thinking things, even if it's uncomfortable, yeah? You can allow this, that conversation with other people as well. You can go through that process.
I think too, like, you know, we're kind of thinking about this in terms of the really, really big topics, which the death process is quite painful.
Yeah.
But, like, just in terms of the smaller things that we might have a conversation about, like, where's a good place to shop and ethical shopping or something. Okay, maybe I need to reconsider the way I do that. Like, there's smaller versions of this that are nowhere near as painful.
No, exactly.
But it's still, instead of just going, I'm not going to engage with your opinion, to still take it on and to do our small little you and come out.
Definitely. But just going back to those two stories I told you, right? Do you remember the two guys, the one having his lunch and the one who just went up to that poor woman whose kid was gay, with their opinions, their truth? This way. What if, just for a minute, we didn't tackle the conversation like that? What difference would that have made to that relationship between those people? What could have happened? What was missed? Where could that have gone if there had just been a moment for suspending the judgment and going on the journey of someone else's experience that's not ours, listening to what they have to say on this. It's not your experience, but talking I and now rather than I and it. This is an I and now conversation. It ain't easy. You're going to end up with a lot more. We do this, we're going to have less and less answers, less and less stuff we agree on, less and less absolutes. We're going to, you know, it's like, yes, but maybe it might be.
It does bring humility.
Maybe a bit more humble. Maybe we'll be maybe a little more diverse. Maybe we'll allow for that. Maybe less people on the margins, more people from the margins in the group, less of us and them. Us and them is huge. Me and, you know, us, we all know the truth, us and them. What if? So I pray for us. Lord, we come before you now and we are saying before you, what if? And I think that Nereda's right, Lord. In some ways, we don't want to take on the massive, big, topics to have to think through. But there are loads of smaller things, smaller you journeys that we can make, smaller places of liminality. And Lord, we want to have the courage and the bravery to say, Lord, can you take us onto the baptism journey, onto wilderness journeys, into that space of liminality, that space between I used to know what I think and now I don't know what I think and I don't know what the answers are. That grey space. Can you help us so we can start putting the choices, Lord, into place and working this out, Father? We need some help with that. We're only going to know this if we start experiencing it. So I guess I'm asking, Lord, that we might experience that space. And all of those who are brave enough say amen or do not say amen. Amen. All right, that's it. I'll try and remember the chocolate next week.